Hey there, I'm Jim, and today I want to talk straight to the part of you that still wonders. Did they even care? Did they ever feel what I felt? If you're someone who's ever loved deeply, who gave without asking, who could feel their shift in energy before they even said a word only to be met with emotional distance or silence, this video is for you. Because the truth is, you didn't disappear. You just moved into their head rent-free, 24/7. In this video, I'll walk you through why avoidant individuals often become haunted by the very person they tried to push away, and how the quiet, grounded presence of a super empath becomes the loudest echo in their mind long after you've walked away. This isn't about going back, and it's not about waiting around. This is a reminder that real love leaves a mark, even if it wasn't returned the way you deserve. If you've ever wondered if you were too much, I'm here to tell you, you weren't too much. You were the lesson they weren't ready for. So watch this video until the end, because I'm going to show you what really happens inside the mind of the avoidant when someone like you goes silent. And if this kind of healing, bold content resonates with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You've been quiet long enough. A super empath isn't some mythical personality you have to strive to become. It's you if you've ever walked into a room and instantly sensed a shift in the energy. If you've seen a flicker in someone's eyes and picked up on unspoken pain. If you've ever loved someone with a heart that had no armor, no tactics, just truth. Super empaths don't try to understand people with logic. They feel what hasn't been said, see what hasn't been revealed, and love not with conditions, but with presence. That presence, warm, patient, intuitive, is the greatest gift they offer. And yet, because they feel so much, so deeply, and so honestly, super empaths are often drawn to those who are their emotional opposite, the avoidants. This is the cruel paradox of connection. Those who feel the most deeply are drawn to those who avoid feeling the most fiercely. While the empath opens up to connect, the avoidant builds walls to stay safe. One seeks closeness, the other withdraws. But what makes the super empath truly powerful isn't just their depth of love, it's their ability to create emotional safety without forcing it. They don't demand, they don't expose, they don't manipulate, they simply show up. And in that calm presence, the avoidant feels seen, perhaps for the first time, without being judged. They're allowed to be without performance, and that moment of being seen becomes the most terrifying threat to the avoidant's ego, because it forces them to face what they've always denied, that they need connection. Super empaths don't always realize that simply being themselves is enough to pierce through the deepest defenses. And while the avoidant may disappear, shut down, or run, they can't forget. They can't unfeel the truth the empath helped them touch. That love doesn't have to be controlling, defensive, or guarded. It can just be. And that, though it sounds simple, shakes the very foundation the avoidant built their identity upon. That's why when a super empath enters the life of an avoidant, it's not just a relationship, it's an internal confrontation. On the surface, the avoidant may act indifferent. They might disappear, detach, or maintain their distance as if the connection meant little. But underneath that composed exterior, a quiet, emotional earthquake has already begun. Because the empath, through their unguarded affection, perceptive presence, and open heart, doesn't just offer love, they offer a mirror. They become a silent reflection that the avoidant cannot ignore. In that mirror, the avoidant doesn't just see the gentleness of the other, but also glimpses themselves, everything they've worked so hard to avoid: fear of vulnerability, inner emptiness, and emotional needs they've long labeled as weakness. The empath doesn't need to speak to make an impact. They simply exist. And that presence, unconditional, non-controlling, unafraid, becomes the very thing that unsettles the avoidant the most. Because it can't be rationalized, manipulated, or dismissed. It's real. And realness is something the avoidant has spent years trying to outmaneuver. For someone used to controlling distance, being around a super empath feels like losing control. They feel seen too clearly, too deeply, and that unsettles them. To admit their feelings would mean dropping the mask, lowering the walls, and stepping into the one place they fear most: closeness. And if they can't do that, they run. Most do. But here's the paradox. Even when they run, they don't leave you behind. You remain in their mind, not because you chased, but because you touched the part of them no one ever reached. Your silence, your compassion, the questions you asked that they couldn't answer, these don't fade. They replay, loudly. And what you need to know is this: they remember you far more than they'll ever admit, but they don't have the emotional language to express it. They don't have the internal framework to process it. So they stay quiet, they turn away, they keep busy, and hope time will fade it. But real connection doesn't dissolve with time. It stains like ink on paper that was never meant to stay blank. The super empath doesn't just leave memories. They leave behind an emotional benchmark, a standard of depth the avoidant cannot forget. Even if they seek out other connections to drown the imprint, everything feels shallower in comparison. It doesn't make them hate you, it makes them fear you, because you didn't just love them. You saw the part of them they've spent their whole life hiding. And it's exactly because that presence is so real, so close, so unguarded, that the avoidant suddenly finds themselves with nowhere to hide. They can't play halfway with someone who feels what's unspoken. They can't hide behind jokes, busyness, or silence like they do with others, because the super empath sees through it all. And when someone sees them that clearly, that deeply, their first instinct isn't to step closer, it's to pull away. Not because they don't like you, not because you're too much, but because you've touched the very core attachment fear they've spent their whole life avoiding. You're not the danger, they've simply never learned how to be present in a connection that demands more than performance. And to them, that kind of realness doesn't feel like an invitation, it feels like a threat. What you need to understand is that avoidants aren't emotionless. They don't lack feeling, in fact. They often feel more than you'd expect, but they lack the container. They don't have the emotional language, the tools, or the lived experience to process intense emotions when they come up. So instead of feeling, they disconnect. Instead of speaking, they go silent. It's not because they don't care, it's because they don't know what to do with what they feel. They don't understand how someone could see them so clearly and not judge them. They aren't used to love that comes without manipulation or control. And when they can't read you like they could past partners, they feel out of control. And in their world, losing control equals danger, which means it's time to pull away. Here's the paradox. The more genuine the connection, the more afraid they become. The deeper the love, the further they run. The safer the space you offer, the more undeserving they feel. So they begin to retreat slowly, silently, without closure. You start to feel them drift, as if the bond is dissolving into quiet. But inside them, there's a quiet panic, because you've unintentionally triggered their deepest fear. What if opening up gets me hurt again? This is the moment where many super empaths stumble. They sense the connection slipping, so they try harder, they reach out, reassure, over-explain, try to prove their safety. But that only makes the avoidant feel more threatened. Because in their mind, the closer someone gets, the more dangerous it becomes. The intimacy you're trying to build feels, to them, like a threat they must escape. You're not wrong for loving deeply, but you need to know that your love, no matter how beautiful, can't land with someone who isn't ready to receive it. And their withdrawal, more often than not, isn't a reflection of you being too much, but of your connection being too real for them to tolerate. But there always comes a point when the super empath, the one who has loved deeply, given fully, and endured silently, must step back. Not out of anger, not as punishment, but because they finally realize that if they stay any longer, they'll lose themselves. This withdrawal doesn't come from resentment, but from clarity. I cannot keep giving in a relationship where the other person is not ready to receive. And that moment marks the beginning of a real emptiness in the avoidant's inner world. When the warmth, understanding, and patience of the empath suddenly vanish, the avoidant is left without anyone to push against. No more energy to resist, no more questions to dodge, no more eyes that saw through them and stayed anyway. And in that silence, the loudest echoes begin to ring. The avoidant might have believed that your absence would bring relief, that without someone constantly reflecting their fear, they'd regain control. But the truth is quite the opposite. When you're no longer there, their emotional system becomes deeply disrupted. They begin to feel the loss, a quiet kind of grief, unspoken, subtle, but spreading like ink soaking into paper. Then something unexpected happens. They start missing you, not just the comfort or the presence. They miss the emotional safety you offered, the calm that came from being understood without explanation. They miss your patience, your non-judgmental gaze, your presence that never demanded. And even though you've stepped back, You're still inside etched into memory, impossible to erase. What they once took for granted now becomes a benchmark they silently compare everything to. No one else understands them like you did. No one else hears their sadness in a sigh. No one else knows when to speak and when to just be there. And that realization shakes them because they can't move on from you like they've done before. But instead of reaching out, avoidants often wrestle internally in silence. They don't know what to say. They're unsure if you're still there. And most of all, they don't know how to love without losing control. So they stay stuck in their thoughts, replaying your moments, letting your silence remind them of what they've never admitted. They lost something precious. In that quiet storm, they don't realize that you, the one who calmly stepped back air, still having the most powerful impact, not through words, not through persuasion, but through intentional absence. Your silence speaks the loudest, because it doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't plead. It simply says, I deserve a love that can stand still with Menno only when I give, but especially when I stop trying. And here's a powerful truth you need to hear. Empaths are not wrong for loving too deeply. You're not too sensitive, not too invested, not too fragile. To love with depth, to give unconditionally, to sense every subtle shift in someone's energy, this is not a weakness. It's a superpower. It's the ability to connect on a level few can. It's a rare gift. You see people in ways they can't see themselves. And though it hurts when love isn't reciprocated, it doesn't mean you have failed. The real issue isn't that you loved too much. It's that you poured all that love into someone who isn't ready to hold it. You didn't do anything wrong by opening your heart. The problem lies with them not having the emotional capacity, space, or courage to respond in kind. And because you gave without conditions, they felt the void bigger, the loss deeper, because they were outside a kind of connection they weren't prepared to embrace. Love isn't just about giving, it's also about balance. You deserve to receive it. You should never feel guilty for having given your all. You didn't fail by being present, empathic, silent, patient. Those qualities define who you are and are your inner strength, not because they make you weak, but because they make you strong, brave enough to love, to truly see, to not give you heaven when no one else is watching. That is dignity. If you've ever thought you were too much, stop blaming yourself. Your too much isn't a flaw, it's the trace of love, the light you brought into this world. And if no one is ready to receive that light, it doesn't dim it. Instead, it proves that your worth shines even brighter because it radiates on its own. You don't need someone else to validate your worth. You've already confirmed it by loving fully. And when the person you love turns away, you're not losing something. You're reclaiming your place, a place where you don't have to prove you're good enough, strong enough, capable enough anymore. This isn't surrender, it's freedom. And one day, the super empath realizes they have poured too much love into a relationship that could not receive that is not okay. It doesn't come with fanfare or loud declarations. It begins with a quiet whisper in their heart. I deserve love too, not just to give it. And with that, transformation unfolds. They break the first loop. No more explaining themselves. No more texts hoping for a reply. No longer waiting for someone to change. Instead, they begin to set loving boundaries, not out of bitterness but from self-respect. They say no to conversations that harm, to unreciprocated sacrifices, to invisible expectations each time they offer their heart, not out of hardness, but out of dignity. In the silence of self-selection, personal power is reborn. The empath starts prioritizing their own needs, rest, healing, reconnection with self. They stop waiting for someone else to see them. They begin seeing themselves for the first time in a long while. In that space, they rediscover their strength, value, and intrinsic worth. They awaken to the truth that loving doesn't mean losing yourself, it means loving two lives, others and your own. No longer silently standing by waiting, they begin to choose themselves again, choosing to live with intention, to enter relationships they truly deserve, to pursue experiences free from the burden of unspoken needs or anonymous loneliness. They learn to share their heart with those who can receive without expecting. They care without risking too much. They open up, but protect their space. And gradually, everything becomes lighter. This transformation isn't just detoxing from the old relationship. It's a rebirth visible in the clarity of their eyes, authenticity of their smile, firmness in their steps. They don't just recover, they grow. They don't just choose, They redefine love, with boundaries, with awareness, and healthy reciprocity. That final day of silence isn't a return to the avoidant. It's a bright day, the day they return to themselves, where the super empath no longer walks away because they loved, but stays because they are worthy. Here, love is given not to fill emptiness, but to radiate outward. In the end, what matters most isn't whether the avoidant comes back. What matters is that you chose yourself bravely, consciously in a world that constantly asked you to shrink. Your love was never the problem. Your depth, your empathy, your ability to feel and connect with open-hearted honesty, those are rare gifts, not burdens. You don't need to be less, feel less, or love less in order to be loved. You simply need to give your heart to the right place. And if that place cannot hold it, cannot receive it, then your departure is not the end of love, it's an act of love for yourself. Super empaths are not weak. They are strong in the quietest, boldest ways, daring to love without defenses, to hope even after rejection, and to walk away when staying would cost them their soul. They are mirrors of kindness, of presence, of what's still good in a complicated world. And if you are in the season of choosing yourself again, please know this: you are not alone. There's a generation of souls just like you, learning how to love without losing themselves, learning how to feel without drowning, learning how to save the most beautiful parts of themselves for the ones who can hold them. You don't need to be seen to be valuable. You are the value. And when you live from that truth, clear, grounded, full of love, you don't just heal yourself. You become a light for others still afraid of their own truth. Don't shrink, don't harden, don't love less. Keep being you fully, deeply, honestly. But now, love with boundaries, love with discernment, and love from a place where you are always home. Because love begins with you. And from there, everything else can begin again, this time, the right way.